Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our review of NCIS Season 19, Episode 17, titled Starting Over. And this is the much hyped NCIS Hawaii crossover, which is mostly just like 3 minutes of crossover content. I mean, we will say from the start, neither Jess nor I are big NCIS Hawaii viewers, so we're not really going to focus a lot on that stuff here.
Honestly, I've never actually seen NCIS Hawaii. I haven't watched it, and with this being a crossover, I still didn't watch it. I'm a person that if you guys are Grey's Anatomy fans, you already know where I'm going with
Yes,
this.
yes, yes.
There's just it. I'm not a fan of being forced to watch another show that I'm not interested in. If I was interested in NCIS Hawaii, I would have watched it already, but I didn't. So these types of situations where they bring up a forced crossover where I'm forced to watch the other show to see what happened, it's not for me. It's not for me. And I understand why they do it. It's
Yeah.
a great idea to try to get people to be introduced to the new show that might not be interested in it until they give it a chance. But for me, I'm just not one of those people. I like to just, I'll check out the trailer, check out who's in the cast. If I'm not interested, I'm not interested.
Spoiler alert. Torres does not die. We're saying this without even seeing the Hawaii episode. They ain't killing off Torres. Sorry about the cliffhanger at the end of this episode.
And speaking of things that we're sorry for, one of our mics have broke.
Yeah, yeah.
So if the sound is not as good as it normally is, it's because one of our mics has broke and we are in the process of getting it fixed. So please bear with us.
And hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this discussion. We have more NCIS coverage coming. I know we are kind of getting to the end of the season. There's a little bit of a hiatus coming up, but we still have more reviews on the way, so you don't want to miss those.
Also, follow us over on Instagram, Matt and Jess TV. We've had some updates over there on what's going on with our dog. She went in for surgery last Wednesday. So we're keeping everyone up to date over there on what's going on, how she's doing, her healing process.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in that, Matt and Jess TV over on our Instagram.
Okay, so the biggest issue that I have with this episode is, of course, to the surprise of no one, tied to the crossover, because they had to set this up so that people would watch the Hawaii episode, and I more than understand that. Just like you said a minute ago, they want to make sure people watch that, but because they had to hype that episode up, you knew that the end of this one was probably going to be tied to that. So because the big cliffhanger is Torres and Tenet, it puts us all in a situation where it's kind of like, all right, well, the rest of the case, everything else with NCIS itself, like the actual show that we're watching here, it kind of fades to the background a little bit. And this may be a necessary evil for CBS, but I think for the purposes of what we're doing here, it's a little bit less exciting.
I'm going to be really honest with you guys.
Okay.
This was my least favorite episode of the season. There was a lot of moving parts that just didn't fit right for me, whether it was the crossover aspect, which I did go into this with an open mind. I assumed that there wasn't going to be too much of a crossover, that it was mostly going to be in the Hawaii side of things to bring people from original NCIS over there. So, I mean, for me, that's the part of the episode that annoyed me the least, actually,
Okay,
because
all
there
right.
was just very little of it. The end, and seeing Nick there with Tennant, I mean, the back and forth with them, I'm like, okay, that was kind of fun, and what
Mhm.
was going on, the big car crash
Yeah,
and
yeah,
everything
yeah.
that happened, I'm like, all right, I like some good action on this show. The biggest issues that I'm having are all the romance, and I know that that seems like, who are you, Jessica? You love romance on this show. I do. However, not when it's like jammed in a way that now it seems like there is potential romance for every single main character hooking up with another main character on this show or on Hawaii, except for McGee because he happens to be married. He's the only one. So this episode revealed that maybe Tennant and Nick have hooked up in the past at a conference, that maybe there was something that happened between them.
Yeah.
He kind of sort of danced around a denial, but it wasn't like really enough of a denial. So there's a potential romance brewing there.
Yeah.
Then we already know that the knight in shining Palmer is coming around. They went to a wedding together. There's something that's brewing between Jess and Jimmy. Then we have like what's going on with Casey. Casey is now seemingly at the starting of some sort of relationship with Piper, who also works at NCIS.
Yeah.
Then to top it all off, we have the fourth potential coming up here, which is with Parker and Dr. Grace, who at the end of the episode is like, hey, you know, we still have to make this appointment for your psych eval. Okay, cool. Tomorrow at 2. It's a date. No, it's not a date. It's just an appointment. And she's getting all flustered and flirty and strange. Like, it's too much. This show is not so soap opera-y. That's why when they do have some sort of a romance or something brewing a little bit, it feels special because it's not that often.
So yeah, the only one of these relationship stories that I really had a problem with was the one at the end with Parker and Dr. Grace. And it just, there's so many different reasons for this. Number one, it felt like extremely forced. Number two, there are so many like ethical minefields that are kind of associated with, I know she's not his therapist, but sort of the therapy person and the client, the person getting the therapy relationship. There are some major problems that could be going on there if something kind of materializes here. It didn't feel needed. I was just happy to have Dr. Grace back for the sake of having Dr. Grace back. Like, I like the character. She's sort of a fun recurring presence on the show. So we didn't really need that. And because they jammed that in there, I think they could have done more with Casey and Piper, because that's something that could have been really exciting. It could have been fun. It's nice to get that sort of representation on the show. But because they put in all this other stuff, especially with Parker and Dr. Grace at the end, it kind of felt like an afterthought, and that's a little bit of a bummer.
I feel like they could have done away with the Dr. Grace and Parker. They could have done away with the potential hookup that happened with Nick and Tennant. Nick especially now, that means that he's hooked up with multiple people within the industry, and it's a bit much. Like I said, we're in a situation now where every single main character is either hooking up with or potentially hooking up with or having some sort of feelings for every single one of them except for McGee. It's too much. It's too much.
It is a lot. Like, the only thing I can even kind of sort of relate this to or think about is, like, a long, long time ago, there was a show, well, I guess it wasn't that long, there was a show on USA called Covert Affairs, and I was talking to a producer on this show once, and they were sort of saying that, like, at least in that agency, they really encourage their agents, if you're gonna date, to date each other, because then at least it's somebody, I guess, you can kind of trust with your secrets or whatever else. But that's the CIA. The NCIS is not the CIA. I don't see there being anybody in NCIS that's like encouraging you to date your coworkers. As a matter of fact, Gibbs, it was one of his rules not to.
Yeah, it seems like Gibbs left and that rule left, and now everybody's dating everybody at the office. Too much for me. The other thing that just didn't work for me, which is the thing I was actually the most disappointed by, because if you guys have been here a while, you already know how much I love Fornell. I love him. And I love his relationship with Gibbs. That's the thing that I just loved, the back and forth with them. I loved what Fornell brought out in Gibbs and what Gibbs would, bring out of Fornell. That's the relationship that really worked. But now that Gibbs is not on the show, it felt very misplaced and odd to have Fornell there. Doesn't really have any relationship with Parker. He doesn't have really any relationship with Jess. He's not really ever been that close with TORRES. Like, he felt like someone who, is still trying to relive the glory days of when he was an agent, but he's not. And he's not part of this group, and he's not really that close with anyone in this group. So it felt like just a lot of, we don't need you, we don't need you, we don't need you. And then I was kind of like, they don't need him. And that really hurts my heart because I really like Fornell a lot, but he doesn't fit into the show anymore. And it's unfortunate because, Mark decided to leave, that now, he's just displaced.
I feel like they could have done a better job incorporating him. It felt very much like, all right, we're going to set this up so that, he is sort of involved in grief counseling. He's a sponsor, if you will. And so they found a way to sort of tie him into the victim in this case. And it felt like, all right, this is very coincidental. This is very much all right, we really wanted to find a way to bring Fornell back to the show. This is the way we've conjured up. And it's like you, I like Fornell. I would have been really happy to see him around more. I think the thing that I wish that they had done more of, and this is where I think this was a missed opportunity, is that, Fornell was with the FBI. Parker was with the FBI. Mm-hmm. Like, they could have shown us a more substantial relationship between these two. Like, they could have built something more into the lore here so that they had more of kind of like a fun, interesting relationship that was not like Gibbs and Fornell. I'm not saying they repeat that, but a different sort of dynamic, and that could have been fun. Like, they went through all of these different hoops to make it so that Torres and Tenet had this sort of built-in dynamic, and it's like, why couldn't you guys do that here? I'm not saying in the same way by any means, but just have something that gives Fornell a larger reason to be there beyond just, okay, I'm here to sort of tackle this procedural element because producers wanted to have me back on the show.
The thing is the show already set something like this up with Fornell, which is that he is a PI. And they could be using him with that service. It could have been something where it's like, Fornell is this grief counselor, grief sponsor, and that's fine, and that's how he's connected. But that if they can't find a way to really use him because he's not working with them anymore, but he does have another service where it's like, you know what, we actually need some PI work on this. Oh, Fornell's already kind of connected and he's able to do this kind of work. Let's throw this work to Fornell because that's what he's good at and that's what he does for a living now. They've just completely forgotten the storyline.
It's just a bummer. That's the thing about this episode. There's a lot of things that they could have been so much more, and what they gave us just felt a little bit ho-hum. And to go a little bit, I don't know if this is full inside baseball here or whatever, but NCIS doing this crossover, this is not something that I think Steve Binder woke up one day and was like, I'm doing this. Like 99% of the time, this is the network coming to the shows and being like, okay, we want to make something like this happen. How can we make something like this happen? And it felt like that, as exciting as it probably is for Hawaii fans, I feel like this is going to be very polarizing depending on if you watch Hawaii or not. I think that it really hamstrung NCIS and what NCIS itself could do, because it was like, okay, we don't want to disclose anything that's like hugely important to like the lore of NCIS within this episode, because we're really just setting up this other thing. So like, what sort of case can we deliver that's interesting, but, to be blunt, not that interesting that it takes away from everything else? And that's where we are with kind of a not that interesting episode that could have done things a lot better.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I mean, NCIS is a show that I really love. We've covered this show for a very long time, and it's a show that's very near and dear to our hearts. So whenever we do come across an episode like this where we're kind of like, it wasn't as good, luckily it's few and far between, but it always kind of hurts my heart a little bit because I look forward to NCIS every single week to give me that TV comfort food, especially on kind of like a rainy day like it is out here in California. You're like, ooh, it's NCIS night. This will be sort of my rainy day, TV show. And that's like, ooh, it just didn't hit this week.
Here's the good news. I don't think we're going to have a lot of crossovers here. Like, if you don't like the crossovers, I don't think there's another one coming this season. I could be wrong, but it feels like there's a handful of stories left. I think they're going to probably be mostly team specific, team oriented. Maybe we'll get a return to that Raven stuff that was set up during the Jimmy episode earlier on this season.
As long as it's not going to be these 4 romances that we all have to like keep track of now. It's too much.
I'm still of the belief, even though I know nothing, that Gibbs is going to be in one of these final 4 episodes.
I think so too.
We'll see exactly what happens, but
this show is really good at keeping secrets
yes.
after that whole Ziva return. I think he's coming back too. I think they are very good at not letting it out.
Well, hit that subscribe button. We will be here to talk all about a possible Gibbs return if he actually does show up at some point. It does seem like Ducky will before the end of the season, so we at least have that. Also, follow us on Instagram at MattandJessTV, and we will see you here next time.